Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the wedding altar. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Reverend Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. Good to see you, Justin. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Even better that you matched the intro. That's awesome. I'm happy to be here. Good to see you too, sir. How was the officiating?
The officiating was good. It was I'll talk about it. Is my rose for this week, but just to briefly
Go for it.
hit on it. I think it went really well. I was really happy with like what I ended up with. I feel like on the wedding day it did justice to like my friends who were getting married. I thought it like spoke to them well, but also like wasn't too long, didn't keep everyone just like sitting there listening to me jabber on for forever. And a lot of people said that they liked it afterwards. So I feel like it was a success. I was very nervous. I was like when I first got up. So I like walked in after all the guests had like taken their seats and all. And I like walk in and go up front and I like turn around to the crowd. And as soon as I'm like there looking at this group of people, I just immediately was like shaking physically. Apparently no one could tell, but I could feel my legs, like my knees, like quivering. I hate public speaking.
Sure.
And I thought that like all the preparation and everything that I did would like quell some of that. But initially when I got up there, I was like doing all I could to keep my voice from like cracking and like sounding shaky and everything. And then like as it got going a little bit, the practice did end up paying off, and it just kind of flowed from there. But man, I haven't done any public speaking like that in years and years now. And I thought that like I would feel more confident at this point in life with like going and talking in front of a bunch of people, and it still hit me like the same way it used to in high school doing a Spanish presentation in class. It was weird. It was like I was like, man, I haven't felt this in a long time. I don't get nervous like that over much.
Right. That's funny that like the second you turn around, like, was there a pause at all where you like, oh shit, did you forget what you were gonna say, or did you just notice the like leg tremble and continue on?
I just like noticed it and knew that I had to kind of immediately like, I wait for the song that's like playing to fade out, and then I kind of immediately go into my little like welcoming everyone for coming and all, and reminding them to turn off all their cell phones and whatnot. So,
Sure.
But yeah, it was
from the big day.
Yeah, well, lots of pictures from the wedding photographers, so there's plenty of content. Just didn't want people's phones like a concert in the 2010s.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it went very well. It was a beautiful wedding. So that was my rose for this week. This is not my thorn, but it's just like at the end of last week leading into the weekend, the one day of work, I was like feeling good, doing good, and I'm like, I don't have that much on my plate right now. I'm going to go around, knock out some little things. Like someone was like, the pool gate's having an issue and whatnot. And I'm like, I won't bother maintenance with this. I'll grab my Allen wrenches and like go out and fix this thing. So I'm like out there doing it, and I got stung by a yellow jacket right on my finger. It was like hiding up under the railing and just jumps out and stings me. I wasn't bothering it. I wasn't even messing with like its spot or anything. But it started a war and I won. I got the wasp spray and just sprayed the shit out of it. But man, I like another thing that hasn't happened to me in a long time. It's been forever since I've been stung by a bee or anything. And
Sure, you gotta go outside more for that to happen.
I I feel like I'm outside enough to get stung. I think
Sure.
I'm just a little more cautious when it comes to being around them and whatnot, or maybe I avoid pissing them off as easily. I won't like swat at them.
Yeah, you have a very, it sounds like you have a very civil relationship with the B Nation. However, it sounds like you've encountered a rogue agent of some kind. I'm curious where diplomacy failed between you and the B Nation that they would send
Well,
a rogue spy after you.
bees I'm still cool with. It's yellow jackets because yellow jackets and
Right.
wasps are like the weird cousin that just has too much aggression.
Hmm.
And you're like, yeah, like even at family gatherings, he's always trying to wrestle, and like no one's having it anymore. So this isn't from experience. I don't know where that came from, but I'm
I was
just
gonna say, are you talking about my childhood? Like, I just started to get flashbacks of like, no, 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 stop.
but yeah, yellow jackets. I was like that was weird. I haven't had that, and it left like I still have a mark on my finger from it. A week later, it got me good. So,
Got you good. Hell yeah.
but I killed it, so I win on that trade.
Sure,
So,
sure.
but my actual thorn this week is just that, and it goes along with my seed. As I am trying to get into calisthenics and all, I was brutally sore from my first workout last week and couldn't really physically get myself like do another workout. Like I would not have been successful trying it like for a few days afterwards because I was just, like in a bit of pain, and I'm I do this every time I start working out again, especially if I'm trying something new, but I just overdo it, or like I'll I have some sort of like ability to like push through that one workout even though it's harder than I should be doing it, and then I'm just like feeling it for half a week afterwards. So that was rough last week, and was kind of a bummer. Like since I just didn't feel capable of actually trying to work out more. But I did get back to it, so that was my seed that I was able to get another workout in. I feel better this week. I'm not as sore after that workout, so I think I'll be able to kind of get into a more consistent rhythm, which I'm looking forward to. So that is my rose thorn and seed for the week.
Yeah, and just like Paul Rudd says in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, you got to do less, man. Yeah,
I
yeah, do less.
I like picked a beginner workout, but I think it was supposed to be like, oh, this is like a workout that beginners can do to get like due to your ability in terms of sets and things like that. And
Right.
I'm like, oh, first time ever doing this. I'm just gonna do the entire workout and not like skip out on anything. I'm doing all the sets, all the reps, like, and I don't know. I like I think I'm like too excited about doing it, about like trying something new or like getting back into the swing of things. It like feels good to have that, and so I just like get after it, and then I'm like, why did you do that?
Yeah, it seems like that would make consistency pretty tough. But hey, I mean, it sounds like you got a really good pump in.
I did, and like I said, I'm still very intrigued by the concept of getting into calisthenics and like progressing in some of those different exercises and skills that you kind of gain. So overall, I'm going to continue getting into the rhythm and getting more workouts in. So yeah, so we'll see how it
Hell
goes.
yeah, man. I love to hear that you're getting into the rhythm. That
Yeah,
just feels really good.
it does. I'm like I fell out of like working out a lot for quite a while, and it's nice to like actually have the motivation for the consistency, I guess, because it's hard to get that initial start. A
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
just like
times.
anything. You
Yeah.
know, starting is often the hardest thing. Um, to your point about calisthenics, my that is my rows here. Last week we talked about I ordered a like foam roller for rolling out muscles and tissues, and so I have like a week using that, and I have to say I quite enjoy it. It's mostly effective for like the legs and the lower body,
Mm.
but I think it's really increase the amount of like good stretching I've been able to get done, and I feel like has kind of opened up my legs a little more than I was able to do manually during my stretching sessions. So that's just my simple rows here for the week. My real big, clinker here is my thorn on Sunday. Me and Sarah have our like we do a scheduled business meeting. Often they come up like throughout the week, but on Sunday we have a scheduled one. And now we're learning that maybe Sunday isn't the best day for these, where we go onto QuickBooks and it says the bank account associated with your thing it can't be found. And so we do like the verification, like, oh, update, like, oh, is it just, whatever. We do a bunch of troubleshooting, and it's like, yeah, nah, we still don't know who you are. And it's like, all right, well, that's scary. And like that's where my frustration started. What I was scared something went wrong. And so I just got like quite upset, and I'm pacing back and forth. I asked for Sarah's help and she came in and we were both working on the issue, but eventually there was like no phone number, nobody to call. So I'm just like pacing back and forth in the office, just over Sarah's shoulder, just like, what the fuck is this? Why is this? Like blah blah blah, and I don't understand, and what the hell, and just going off. And she's just trying to work through the issue, and it was just really unfortunate. I put a call into the bank. I wasn't like angry or flipping on the phone or anything. I even my shit out. But I just left a message with this contact that I have at our bank, who like handles any of our business concerns. We could just give her a call, and it's like, well, it's Sunday. Of course, she's not going to be in the office,
Yeah.
and nobody on just like the general lines. It's like, oh well, we're closed on Sundays, and I was just so like, what the fuck in this modern world, like is there nobody I can talk to? And so it was just a whole bunch of that. We ended up just having to say like, oh well, we're just gonna have to pause on this. The bank ended up calling me on Monday. We got the whole thing all straightened out. But man, I have to express just like the fear that I felt, where man, did something really go wrong here? Compounded with the fact that it seemed like there was nobody to talk to about the issue. I was
Yeah.
like, no, 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 no. It all just felt like the end of the world. But Sarah, I mean, she's got a cool head on her shoulders, so she was basically just like, "Bro, shut the fuck up. We'll handle this." It's like, all right, fine. But man, that was like, yeah, that was a doozy for sure there
Oh
on
yeah.
Sunday.
I can imagine like you're basically like my livelihood is gone, and like there's no one who can like figure out what happened. There's no detective on the case. There's no person is like, don't worry, like we got this, like I'll let me look at it. You're like no one even on the other end to be like your money's good, like don't worry. You're just like in limbo to some extent. So I'm glad that they figured it out, but that, yeah, I feel like the potential for that kind of thing to happen, now that you know, might be a good way to be like, let's shift to a different day.
Yeah, we're just gonna move it to Friday or whatever, where at least people are still in the office. But
Right.
yeah, and it is that kind of silly, like, well, duh, no, like, of course. But my silly me in my head, I'm like, well, why isn't there nobody here for me specifically? There should be somebody paid waiting for my call. That's what it should be.
You just don't like. That's one of those things, though, that I think you don't know how to handle it until it happens, and then you don't expect anything like that to happen until it happens. Like, I mean, it's like, in my experience, things like key systems here at my property or at the hotels going down and not having like backup keys or anything like that to give to the guests coming in, and you're like trying to call, like, that has happened to me. And so I can, like, it feels like everything's just falling apart, and you're like sitting on hold for 2 hours, and you're like,
Yeah,
this
and
is
that's
not
like the
getting
slowest
better.
2 hours. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
of course.
So that is rough, but it's one of those. It's a learning moment. It's just
100%.
yeah. So you guys will shift things around, and all will hopefully be well moving forward. But yeah, that definitely sounds like a scary kind of like moment to just not know what's going on.
Yeah, and like I obviously make it worse by like catastrophizing and using way too many fuck words. But yeah, whatever. It was a funny Sunday in that regard. But my seed looking forward, not backwards. We got to learn from the past to inform our future. We've had some earlier mornings, some windows open, and just the breezes coming through. The nice, like, cool, kind of crisper weather has me looking forward to, fall. I think that's going to be an interesting, obviously, turn of events. We're going to be coming out of the summer break. We're going to be getting back into racing, back into the Formula One season, which I'm very excited for. So I just think good things on the horizon. And every time I say that, I think of Mr. Cheezel in Grandma's Boy, where they're all standing in his office and he's like telling them about a dream that he had, and it's like it's a little bit too long, which makes it funny. And then he goes, Dante's like, man, where do you get your weed from? And Mr. Cheezel goes, I buy it from you, Dante. And he just like giggles. He's like, oh, yeah. It's like, dude, that's so good. Anyway, with Mr. Cheezel on the brain, let's keep it moving forward. Aaron, I know you wanted to touch on some points from Formula One, so let's open it up here.
Yeah, a little bit. So, of course, we still haven't locked in some of the driver spots and all. But even on the summer break, some of the drivers are getting their grind on and getting ready to keep pushing in the second half of the season. Valtteri Bottas is practicing his steps up podiums. He won a 95-kilometer cycling race while he's been taking his summer break, while
Oh, wow.
while others are out doing more relaxing things, I guess. Valtteri is just crushing it out there. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Or I guess he, according to this, it says first in his age class, but fourth overall. So either
I mean,
way,
that
still
seems pretty good.
still impressive for someone who's not cycling full time as their sport.
As we understand it, though, it seems like that is his primary secondary mode of, I don't want to say transportation, but like secondary mode of
Like
exercise.
Training, yeah.
Yeah, where he's doing a lot of cycling. So that is kind of a great achievement in hit like a side hobby that is also, conducive to his main career. That's really cool and a great result.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like cycling is kind of the most commonly or most common side form of training that I feel like we see with drivers. I think that they can kind of, it mimics to some extent what they're used to. You're looking at roads and stuff, and you're like trying to kind of quickly go and all.
Sure.
So maybe that's why, but also like not a lot of like pounding, and it's not hard on joints and whatnot. So definitely a good source of training and exercise. Congrats to Valtteri on a nice, like, solid bike race while he's on a break. But of course, with the rosters still not being decided, there's still some other names being thrown around and moves. Apparently, Oscar Piastri, before signing with McLaren, was in talks with Williams. So in that case, most likely would be replacing Nick Latifi. Now that he is signed with McLaren, that does kind of course, leave that Williams seat up in question. I think we had assumed and thought that that would be a seat that potentially would be up for grabs, but the fact that they were working closely with Piastri to get a contract down definitely shows, I think, that they're maybe looking to go a different direction. So Logan Sargent, who is one of the top drivers in F2 currently, is someone that people have put out there as a potential option. So still some seats to be decided and lots of names swirling around, but I wouldn't be surprised to see us have another rookie or two next year in the field coming up.
Yeah, and it'll be a period with a lot of newer drivers. We'll have some like third, second, and then first year drivers. So a pretty fresh class, not a whole lot of experience on the grid, combined with losing one of the most experienced drivers that was on the grid towards next season. It'll be an interesting little shakeup, especially, and I don't know to what extent these things carry out in the real world, but we know from broadcast the relationship between Mick Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel, where, it's the, mentor mentee type thing, and Seb can look out for him and offer him pointers and this and that. I'm curious how many of those kinds of relationships develop as there are more younger drivers on the grid. I think that'll be interesting to see what kinds of relationships are built in this, in this modern era. I don't really know how stuff like that works. So yeah. I just say that to say I think it'll be kind of interesting. And moreover, get fucking rid of Nick Latifi.
Yeah, he just hasn't been able to show anything that, in my opinion, should secure continued seats in F1, other than there not being someone who is at the level to replace him. That's the only reason that I see at this point of keeping him. Unfortunately, I think he seems like a good lad, but he's just not going to stay in F1 the way he's been driving, and so I'm happy to see another young driver get a shot. I do think it is going to be a bit odd, though, because we do have a lot of these kind of it's currently, I feel like it's a pretty veteran heavy grid. And I think we're going to be a bit closer to like 50-50 now between guys that I think of who are really like have had quite a bit of experience. Valtteri, Lewis, Fernando, Max, Charles, Carlos, even Ocon. Like, you've got a lot of these guys that have been in for a decent stretch of time now. But then with all these young drivers, I don't know if... I think my mind immediately, as opposed to the mentor-mentee and the relationships that will develop, just goes to are these drivers, is it going to just be veterans finishing at the top of the grid and these like young guys at the bottom? Like, is there going, I would imagine there being a lot of parity there where, cause especially with the quality of the veteran guys that are still around and everything, driving at a really high level. Alonso, Hamilton, Max, Charles, like these guys are all driving at very high levels right now. Um, so these other young drivers coming in are one going to be new to F1 cars or just newer and have less experience, and also most likely be in kind of bottom of the midfield teams.
Hmm. Yeah, bottom of the midfield team, slower cars. So yeah, even if they are like, quick, um, it'd be tough to say that they're gonna have the pace to like even just compete with the veterans, not because they're beginners, but because they're just in like inferior equipment. Um, and that what you were saying brings up the idea of like building years in Formula One. I'm curious if there's a mindset in a certain fan or somebody who pays like very close attention to the sport and has for a while. I'm curious if they frame it in like little builds and crescendos where, oh, okay, so I see next year we're going to have a lot of this, we're going to have a lot of that. So I'm not necessarily worried about what some of these things are happening. Those will be storylines for like 2 years from now
Mm-hmm.
is when something here really starts to bloom over here, right? Like a new driver in a Williams in a program that's improving. Oh, they've got some new parts. Holy shit, that was a P8 finish in 2023, finished up by like blah 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 blah. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So I'm curious, like, and this to me is what's interesting about Formula One and why it is something to be followed in that kind of longitudinal sense where it's like you can see shifts like this, and I can now see the draw of something like a baseball where if you understand the farm systems and the minor leagues, you can see these like full franchise moves and
Mm.
flows, and that's kind of exciting, and that's what it feels like we're kind of moving into, where like last year felt like a really really competitive season
Mm.
where you had a large chunk of the grid like really pushing, and now it seems like we may be moving into a phase like with the new regulations. We know we have another set coming up. I know you wanted to hit on this evening.
Mm.
So yeah, we have a little bit of shifting tides here, which is kind of fun as we get into these roster conversations.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I feel like the ebbs and flows of the driver lineups and everything. I think that's something that is just interesting because you and I have not seen that in our F1. We were on the like slope climbing up towards this big peak over the past couple years with um, how competitive like Red Bull was really getting with Mercedes after Mercedes has been so dominant up until last year, with an extremely close title fight and all, with Red Bull getting that. Now, of course, well, for Max, not the constructors. Now going into new regulations and whatnot, I think it also gives just like this opportunity for the young drivers coming in um, to shine, because I think like with all this parity and all and everything, if a young driver coming in or who's just been in F1 for a year or two, um, is able to put out some really solid, consistent performances, and be able to beat some of these really solid drivers that are out there on the grid, that is going to stick out like a sore thumb in the best way and really give opportunity to kind of move up and grow as one of those young drivers. So I think it'll be cool to see like who of these young drivers could potentially be that seen as that like rising star. Whereas right now we've just, I feel like with the young drivers kind of had more of a mindset of like, oh, like, will these 3 or 4 young guys be able to keep up with the 16 guys that have been doing this for years? Like,
Right.
so I think it'll be cool. I'm looking forward to it. But talking about the regulations going into 2023 and those technical regulations like raising the floors by that certain, it's 15 millimeters. They're also adjusting other components of the car to fit with that and to be able to work with that raising of the floor. They're also planning to add a additional sensor into the cars that will monitor the vertical G forces that the drivers are experiencing in the car to be able to actually say like, hey, like you guys are going to be, I don't know, fined, penalized in some way because your drivers were experiencing over the allowed level of force from the porpoising effect. Hopefully it won't be a long-term issue, but they're definitely taking steps to kind of ensure that level of driver safety like we've been talking about with the porpoising issue that has sprung up. So that's kind of interesting that they've made all these decisions and kind of agreed upon them just to see how it'll affect the different teams, whether it brings everyone a little more in line or how that ends up shaking out.
Yeah, and there are going to be teams that like this change more than others. I think Red Bull would have been lobbying pretty hard against it, being that their package seemed pretty good. Same thing with like the Alpha Tauris. It didn't seem like the Ferrari struggled with it too much,
Yeah.
but the images of Lewis crawling out of that car are going to be fresh in everyone's mind and very hard to forget for honestly like a lot of years. So yeah, I'm kind of for it. I think that's fine. And especially then you lose the like there's something like buzzwordy about something like that where it just feels like the only thing people can and want to talk about. And it's like, well, let's solve this so we can like talk about some racing or talk about, the chest hair on George Russell or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good way to look at it because you're resolving an issue so that the teams can actually focus on improvements and like trying to be more competitive racing wise as opposed to just trying to like make it possible for their drivers to drive. So
Right.
I think that's a nice like either way, if you already had it figured out and everything, then you can just put all of that focus on to continuing to make upgrades and bring better aero or like whatever improvements you have while other teams are trying to readjust their components so that it like meets regulations and works and all. But then looking forward to further down the road technical regulations for 2026. The new power units that we're going to have coming in they're sustainable. They're going to be sustainably fueled. They're still going to have really high horsepower, over 1,000 horses pulling those things. Better electrical power, switching up the MG. I think it's the MGU or
Okay.
which is their like battery harvesting system and all. They're making some improvements on that. They'll be running all sustainable fuel, so even though it won't be a net zero for all the travel and things like that F1 is doing, at least the driving will be carbon neutral
Hmm.
on the grid and everything. So they're going to be making some big shifts, shifting to a lot of like improvements with the electrical and the battery and everything. But that is not too far on the horizon in 2026, and I'm happy to see that F1 is like being kind of conscious of just the environment, kind of global climate and everything to kind of make some of these moves, and hopefully as we continue forward and have hopefully many more years of F1, that they will improve the other aspects of it to be a little more sustainable as well.
Yeah, and maybe eventually we'll just end up running these cars on like, just oxygen harvested out of the air by some, flux capacitor in the Formula 1 machines. So then not only is it not having an effect on the environment, maybe it was the faster these drivers go, the more flowers are grown in the world. There's trees that just spontaneously pop up. I think that'd be quite fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be able to change the laws of physics and all, but they're working their way to use what's currently known about the laws of physics to
Sure.
improve
With
their footprint.
with the amount of science fiction I've been watching recently, I could be convinced of anything.
Anything you say.
Anything. Well, I was gonna go real deep and say eventually we're gonna be able to power these cars with just one drop of Phyrexian oil, but that would have been a real deep dive. Those are like an enemy character in Magic the Gathering lore.
Oh, I was gonna go with more on the side of like convince you of anything. LCS is gonna win Worlds.
Oh, I mean, with the way Evil Geniuses is playing, I think they might.
They've looked pretty good, but I think we can slide our way into the League of Legends talk. I didn't have any other notes for F1, if that works for you.
Slide on me, sir. Let's start with LCS.
Cool. So we're into the last week of the LCS season. The matches that we looked at were the CLG and TSM matchup. So kind of seeing how CLG goes into the break and how TSM wraps out at the end of a tough couple of splits. It it was a interesting game. I think overall, I didn't expect it to be super competitive. As we've mentioned, kind of throughout the season, TSM has not only lost Tooney and have Solo in the top lane now, but just looked very inconsistent and kind of just have not been able to put as much together on the year. So I didn't expect them to put up too much of a fight this week.
No, of course not. But I think there is value in recognizing that this is a young roster, very similar to what we were talking about with Formula One. Like this is a TSM that has come off their deity, their figurehead, their leader, their ever trusting God. Like he's out of the picture, so obviously they're listless and wandering and just without a home. So yeah, it's gonna be TSM rebuilding the temple of Reggie, and we're gonna have to make those pyramids large. So we're gonna see a lot of time of them, doing the drudgery. And while they were able to come out with a victory, obviously it wasn't like the most competitive game. However, I do like seeing TSM win in this way. I now that they've cleansed some of the bad energies, some of the juju that's been going on, I'm willing to say like, hey, it seems like these players have something going on. Let's give them a chance. They're building. They're obviously not going to be championship winning squad. Maybe not now, not next split or whatever, but it's interesting to see a team building back up, getting some victories, and because like we do have to recognize they've had a really tough time of it with their roster being so wishy-washy.
Yeah.
I imagine the practice was must have been erratic. The communication couldn't have been developed well. And that comes across in the gameplay. If you go back and tune into some of their matches over the season, there's a bunch of split calls, a bunch of wayward souls wandering around. So TSM is they're doing okay for the hand that they've been dealt, and I think it's encouraging to see them win in this way. We had some early pressure from CLG. They had some options for success. Contracts, though, not really helping, making it a 4v5.
Yeah, it was tough because CLG went and kind of they came out with their game plan and they pushed it hard early. They went bot twice, got a couple of ganks off, but then it was just the I don't know, the overreaching of CLG as well, that kind of, it was almost like they were like, oh, we're way better than TSM, like we can just do whatever we want, and started putting themselves in bad positions. Palafox going in way too deep trying to get a solo kill and just ends up running right into to Spica, who's there to help Maple out, and get the kill on him. They just consistently started like kind of overstepping and making these plays to try and get to just like pick someone, but without the preparation around it to ensure that they were going to just get a pick and be able to then turn and fight or back away or whatever. They're going after picks, and then when they don't get it, they're all of a sudden just like too far in. And TSM really played well, and in a pretty controlled manner. They were able to kind of control the objectives pretty well around the map, and just like you said, young lineup. You don't necessarily expect that, but they had a really solid macro as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think one of the highlight plays of the match was you highlighted the pressure that CLG was bringing bottom lane, and TSM on the dragon setup, they got a fuck ton of vision in that bottom side jungle. They had a feeling that they were going to be coming bottom lane again to get pressure in the bottom side, then look for the Drake after. TSM countered there with a pretty good fight, and once the Yumi LeBlanc doesn't get a kill in a lot of those scenarios, Palafox would, double distort forward with Yumi on his back, looking for the one shot, get three-quarters of their health gone. But if that's not a kill, it's not a 4v5, right? And I think that hunting for the insta-gib, like you were saying, put CLG in some pretty bad spots, and that bottom kind of tempo shift where TSM was able to get that dragon, and then they really were able to ramp it up. So yeah, really good win from TSM. I think Maple played a great Azir game. Spica 6-2-9 highlight on the Wukong. I love that is just a staple of pro play now. The monkey.
Oh,
I
yeah.
imagine there's a delighted Pop Tart 272 out there somewhere saying, "I told you Wukong was viable."
Oh yeah, he's probably thriving right now. He's grandmaster in solo queue, I'm sure.
I hope he's out there coasting on $1 million.
I hope so. Just ready to be the next guy signed in. But I think that my concern on the side of CLG is not as much that they were overreaching in these instances, but it's that their game plan doesn't really makes sense to me from the get-go. They focused bot lane, like I had said, but Sivir is, yeah, she can get strong early and get kills and everything, but I feel like the concept of focusing mid or top lane, Ornn is going to scale ridiculously. The only way you stop that is by getting the Camille ahead and putting her in a position to be able to be in that 1v1 with the Ornn. And it got to a point where she just couldn't. Solo was just blowing up the Camille with his Ornn. The other side of it, like you said, Palafox going in with the Yuumi on his back, double distorting, throwing out chains and everything, and not getting the kills. If you focus mid and really push to put that lane ahead, that's the one that you kind of need in your team comp to be the most far ahead. Sivir's always going to eventually scale from CS and be, I mean, Luger Flame Horizon Instinct. He had 447 CS at the end of the game there. Like
most
he
in
is
the game, by far.
He is going to scale up super well with the Sivir without needing the early kills. Like they just put their focus in the wrong area, and to be kind of just off about, like, you pick an entire team comp and to be off about what you need to do to push your team ahead. It does give me some questions going into the playoffs here. It doesn't make me super high on CLG.
Well, if I understand, yeah, and they're even higher seeded than TSM here. So I think it was a really solid win from TSM. Good draft. Yeah, I think GG to them. Well played.
So, getting into the second game, we had Team Liquid and 100 Thieves. A little bit more of a heavyweight matchup. We're looking at two teams that were at the time, I guess, pretty even, around, I think, 13-3 or so, something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at the time of the game they were both tied for third place, and then the winner locks in the second slot, I think it was.
Yeah, so a pretty heavyweight matchup, and I think we had talked about it before, but seeing the Talia in the mid lane, it's fun to watch, but I've really also like this, the Senna Seraphine in the bot lane as well, I think is looking like a really strong option for some of these comps that you are able to kind of prioritize that bot lane by having that double range advantage.
Well, and to go even deeper, I think what's scariest about the Seraphine specifically with a fasting Senna is in the draft, you have to be worried about. So if you ban the Tom Kench, okay, so they're not going to pick Senna, but you have to be worried if they pick Senna first, you're only going to ban one of them, TK or Seraphine. And either way, you have to say, all right, well, if we're giving them TK, that means, well, we need to play this bottom lane. If we're giving them Seraphine, then we have to play this bottom lane. It's so, like, you're
reactive.
Yeah. You're forcing a reaction from your opponents just by this pick having these two really, really strong pairings that it's like, man, well, what are you going to give us? So I really like that pairing specifically. I like it for the draft. I like the way it plays out in game. The Core JJ on Amumu with Han Sama on the Sivir, I think was a great answer for their team. Obviously, they just want to run forward. But yeah, just highlighting the bottom lane there. I really like the Senna Seraphine.
Yeah, and I liked Team Liquid's comp as well. Kind of in contrast, they have the Sivir, they have the Azir that can put out DPS from range a little bit,
Hmm.
along with a lot of CC and disruption that can kind of go in and lock people up. So you're really looking for those 5v5 fights or 5v4 fights if you can get them after getting a pick with the Skarner. So a really, really good option there. But on the other side, 100 Thieves does have a lot of kind of answers to that between the Wukong, the Talia, the Seraphine with her ultimate and everything. So I did expect it to be a pretty interesting matchup and pretty tight fight, which it did end up being because I feel like both teams were, in a lot of instances, able to kind of execute their team comps in certain fights, but then it was just very back and forth on that execution. So, but Han Sama looked phenomenal on the Sivir. Like you said, that was a great pick for the go in comp to just run.
Yeah, and he was really, really sick with the auto spacing, really clean. But no, I think the real shining light from the Team Liquid side was Core JJ on the Amumu. Like some of his bandage tosses were just disgusting, and the double tap that you get is amazing. He was like Spider-Manning to carries. Like once or twice, he was like hitting two people down the line, getting in with the ult. So I think he was really a team fight facilitator in the early to mid game for Team
Mm-hmm.
Liquid. Santorin playing a little bit into factor there for the early game. But yeah, like you were saying, both teams playing to their win conditions, looking for the fights that they knew worked for them. However, once we got towards like the mid and the late game, it got really tough for Team Liquid to get on top of the 100 Thieves carries, especially in those little choke points where you just
Mm-hmm.
have every single bit of poke just covering like full swaths of the board that the whole team's running through. Like everything from Talia hits everybody. It's all AoE. Everything from Senna is AoE. Seraphine is just like blocking up choke points, and we saw so many ults from Huhi just locking down 3, 4 people when they're the Skarner's just running at you. Aatrox is doing his backflips towards you. I mean the counter engage and like kite back in the fights towards the mid and late game, like around the Baron. It was just like, oh, you're never getting into there. It was kind of crazy the way it was built.
Yeah, it worked out really well for 100 Thieves because, like, one of my notes from the matchup was just that, and I'll talk about it a little bit in other matches as well. But these team fights and some of the changes that they've made, like in terms of being less bursty and everything, have allowed these team fights to just go longer. And when you're playing as Team Liquid in this comp where you're trying to run at people, get picks and everything, you are using so many of your ultimates, so many of your abilities to try and start those fights. And like you said, the peel back and the ability to kind of retreat from 100 Thieves to wait out the storm and
Mm-hmm.
everything to
Yeah.
then be able to re-engage was really impressive. The Wukong ultimates from closer were really solid to be able to kind of allow his other carries to stay in the fight or to disengage a bit better. They were just able to really weather that storm and then come out strong on the other side, and then kind of gain those uh, advantages through the team fights, getting picks, chasing people down, and all afterwards.
Yeah, and there were two fights, one around the Baron, one around the Dragon Pit. I think it was like for fourth Drake, maybe one of the later dragons, and then also around the Baron fight, where it was just the Abadaga Weaver's Wall, just like
Mm.
cutting off a section of the fight. There was one where it literally blocked off Bjergsen and Hans Sama from getting to the fight. It created this like top-sided 4v3 that 100 Thieves literally just ate them up, and Bjergsen and Hans were like, oh wait, oh, damn! And it's just like all bloody on top of the rock wall. It's like, oh no, dude. So like there were some really, really clutch alts from Abadaga, just heads up use of that character, understanding that he could influence fights from like 3 screens away and say like, oh no,
Mm.
you actually don't get to walk through that jungle. Like really heads up play, really creating opportunities for his team for, closer and someday to just run onto the people that got separated out. And I think it was that kind of play that ended up getting 100 Thieves the win, where one wrong step, Team Liquid was just wiping them in a 5-on-5 fight.
Mm.
If they like got on top of the Seraphine, it was over.
Oh yeah.
It was just game over. So yeah, I think 100 Thieves really playing to their win condition and understanding the tools that they had got them over the hump that I think Team Liquid was like, they had a really strong team fight.
Yeah, they did, and they knew how to play around it. They just couldn't quite get the damage that they needed to done to be able to win those team fights and get the early kills they needed.
Sure.
But really, still a very competitive and fun game to watch. I enjoyed that. I think we're gonna end up with some really solid playoff matchups as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that coming up before too long in the playoffs.
Yeah, we have a couple of good matchups. CLG versus CL9 and what did I say? CL9?
Mm.
CLG versus Cloud9 in round one. Team Liquid versus FlyQuest. TSM and Golden Guardians waiting for the loser of those 2 games. And then we have EG and 100 Thieves seeded into the second round. And then the matchups will continue. We'll see what we're going to do with playoffs. I don't think we're going to be able to cover every match. I think what we'll do is look for like. Yeah, we'll figure it out, but yeah, that's what we have going on for North American playoffs. Let us move forward to the LPL, or let's do LCK and then do LPL because the LPL
Cool.
series was actually pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. And so, spoiler alert: the LCK series was not as exciting. Um, so we had the T1 versus Damwon gaming matchup. Um, Damwon being the fourth seed, I did expect it to be relatively competitive. But T1, after dropping a couple of different matches throughout the season, just looked really on point and kind of like they've hit a good form going into the playoffs. We see in the first game, Damwon has just a dive-heavy comp. They've got the Sejuani, the Xin You've got the Zeri, who's really trying to get in there and just be microing around all of the opponent and everything. So you have all of that, but on the side of T1, you just the amount of engage, disengage, damage, everything coming out was kind of that counter that they brought out, and they didn't play it super well from the get go, but I did feel like T1 just had kind of better options for how they wanted to play out the game after the draft.
Yeah, and it seemed like, well, Damon's draft wasn't bad. Like they had a
No.
couple of really solid targets for the Yumi to hop onto. In the mid game, the Xin Zhao is a really nice Yumi target. Really helps like with the like skirmish slash pick scenarios where you catch somebody out with the wind is lightning, wind I am lightning, whatever the move is where
Yeah.
he charges. You get what I'm saying. But yeah, Yumi was Xin Zhao really strong in the mid game. So they obviously like had tools and options. I like the pivot from the Ignite top lane on Sejuani. Nuguri decided to take the Flash teleport matchup. I think that's becoming a little more standard,
Yeah.
which I just like that a whole lot better. But yeah, so Damwon has tools. They're not like picking bad champions, obviously. And what was unfortunate, I think, was they weren't able to like get anything going. They weren't able to create in the early game to where the game goes to 12 minutes, and even a play that T1 engages, they go for the turret dive, they fail, they lose two of their members. They're like, all right, hold up. They base, and then they're like, let's just try again at the dragon this time. And with a couple of really decisive picks and moves, they're just able to turn it on their head. So there was something about like maybe Damwon waited too long. They couldn't find their opportunity. But if you look at the top lane, they take their first like just standard 6-minute base. They both walk back to lane. They're like, all right, cool. You know, we'll have our teleport. We'll look for a bottom lane play. We'll look for the dragon. Oh shit! And then the Nuguri gets ganked and has to, TP back to the top lane or whatever. So it's like, okay, so now they have TP advantage. Just like all over the place, they just had advantages.
Yeah, and T1 in that fight that you're talking about, I think they just were able to like put a ton of damage on Showmaker super early to where he had to use his soldier to get out. And so they were able to kind of just win the fight from there. And then from that point, they did a pretty decent job of kind of methodically going through. And I think that was my big thing with T1 in this series was that they played very methodically, and T1 doing that at a high enough level is terrifying to other teams. I mean, not just T1, but any team that can play an extremely high level of League of Legends in terms of player quality, like laning, all of that, and then they also are super good at the just very tempered macro, just pushing each advantage little by little till they get the win, is like, that's scary, because a team like that, when they get bigger advantages, can push those harder and faster. So in this case, we did see Damwon just not being able to get the right picks. They go in on the Nautilus at one point and blow him up, just using absolutely everything at their disposal to just immediately get turned on by the rest of T1 going, you have no cooldowns? We do. Like, here, let's bring them to the party. And just winning that. The one thing that I was a little iffy on with T1, and as I said, I feel like they played out their advantage as well, was that Baron fight. I don't know why they go for a 50-50 Baron. I know they're so far ahead, but they didn't try to like stop Canyon from getting in there. They didn't try, like, they just like were like, yep, we're just gonna hit the Baron and Canyon can dive over the wall and try and steal it. And like, oh well, if he does. Like, they didn't do anything. They didn't peel off and let him like hop in and just blow him up and then go back to it. They were just like, nah, we'll keep hitting Baron. Oh, he got in. Well, we just outsmited you and now we win. It was just a little bit weird of a call to put that at risk, because the rest of Damwon's team was not in a position that T1 would have been able to like chase them down as well. It would have been 4 Damwon players with Baron versus 5 T1 players.
Right.
And that's still like not a great spot for T1 when they had all the advantages up to that point.
Yeah, because what's the Baron timer? Is it 3 minutes you have the buff, or is it... It's not a full 5-minute buff.
No,
I think it's 3.
I think it's 3 and then 5-minute respawn.
Gotcha.
Like
so
that.
Yeah, giving a 3-minute respite for them to just like get lanes pushed out, get vision out a little bit in the jungle, like that's actually not that great for T1 in that scenario. So yeah, I think flipping the Baron there was not that great. but obviously owner had his finger on the trigger. He did it okay.
Yeah, and then from there they just continued to be able to push, dive, get picks, kills, and kind of
Sure.
close out. Um,
And then
go
moving on to game two here.
Yeah, going into game two, we see the Vi coming out again, and I've actually I've slowly started to change my tune on the Vi a little bit. It has seemed stronger than I really expected it to, including in there was one of the LCS games that I was watching. I believe it was the TSM EG matchup where Inspired was just punching the crap out of C9 after they basically won a team fight, and then he goes and just gets a triple kill to be able to push it on top. So the Vi, seeing the damage that comes out and everything, the ability for that if it gets ahead to really
Mm-hmm.
propel the game forward was definitely an um, interesting aspect of this draft. But also there were a ton of jungle bans that came out, kind of pushing that towards the top of the pool, I guess. So
Yeah, definitely. Which I thought was kind of interesting from Damwon. It seemed like they had like a pretty top-sided draft where they really wanted to focus on the Silas Vi and Orn. Forgetting Orn's name just totally made me lose my train of thought. When watching the draft, it was interesting to see they kind of get the defensive bottom lane, wanting to focus topside, and then T1 is just like, well, okay, I think we'll pick the Draven here
yeah,
and just let him farm up, and it seemed like a pretty good answer to a Damwon bottom lane that obviously wasn't looking to fight. They weren't looking to take that advantage. They were just looking to scale up, have Braum protect that carry, keep them alive, but not play any kind of like progressive system there.
yeah.
So decent draft plan from Damwon, solid answer from T1 with the Draven, and I really like the Ari Xin Zhao combo. Just super aggressive for the early and mid game.
Yeah, I agree because there's so much that that T1 was just able to counter. They're like, "Oh, you guys want to focus topside with the Silas and Vi with the Ornn in the top side and everything, and you're just going to leave your bot lane to kind of fend for themselves a bit." Like you said, taking the Draven pick and everything for that pressure, but also along with that, taking champions in the top side that are not going to easily just be like killed or get hopped on top of. The Gragas, you have so much disengage for yourself. You have your body slam to get away. You have your ult once that's up. Ari, as soon as she has ult, she's dashing all over the place. It's going to be hard to get on top of her. So the drafting from T1 really like snuffed out a lot of Damon's potential options. And like you said, with the priority in the bot lane, they're able to easily early on utilize that to get the dragon. They're able to then rotate mid and get an easy pick, which they feed the kill to Guma on the Draven to just cash in on
Mm-hmm.
all of those what is his thing
I think it's adoration stacks.
that yeah, cashing in the adoration stacks to get some bonus gold and everything. They in this matchup in game two were really like similarly to game one able to push those advantages, but it was a lot more extreme in game two. I felt like from just watching through, I was like there was no point after that early game really that I felt like Damwon was going to be able to pull their way back in.
Hmm. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot that they were able to accomplish. I mean, Guma like end game screen, he had 17,000 gold, where the next closest gold on his team was like 14K, and then Dwakdam had 14 as well. So like was just way far and above. His CS numbers were great, and obviously just a couple of like really key cash ins just skyrocketed his gold. But what was interesting was like even like there's this sense of like futility from Damwon at the end of it where you see Canyon burn his ult. I think it was on Zeus or like Faker or someone. Burns his ult, like trying to get in on him. Has Showmaker there with him. They burn some cooldowns and then just continue like to walk into a fight where Canyon doesn't have his ult anymore. You just see him in the back just like charging up his fist and like he's not doing anything. And then they just like lost the fight. So it was funny. They went out like with some lazy swings, man.
Yeah, and it felt like Damwon was just getting desperate for those kind of
Yeah.
options because a little before that, they send like the entire team to try and run down Faker, or probably I think it was like three guys to run down Faker in the top side, while the four man of T1 is just in the bot side taking an inhib or inhib turret, and they're just like, no, but we killed Faker, so it's fair trade. It's like it's not, but
I mean, they hand out a badge after every game when you kill Faker. It's like a mini achievement every game you can get.
yeah. Well, they were grasping for those straws there at the end,
Yeah.
and I will say that I forget it, Diakdam or
Dwakdam.
Duakdam. He played very, very well on the Zeri. They had a couple of fights that they put up a really nice fight and just were not able. I think at that point, like the dragon fight towards the end for Soul, they were able to stop the dragon soul from being taken. But then used so much doing that they just get wiped by T1, and the game kind of snowballs into the end from there. But Dwakdam was like playing really well, positioning really well. Had some nice opportunities to put damage out, but they were at that point just too far behind.
Yeah.
But he impressed me a lot with his play throughout that game.
Yeah, and with the amount of mobility that Zeri has, it's kind of easy to skirt around those fights. But yeah, staying relatively safe, dealing out what damage he was able to. So yeah, I think for Damwon, he was a little bit of shining light there in that game. In a team like full of like solid players. I think T1 just drafted really well, played out their win conditions. And I think like you were alluding to in game one, it's scary when a team gives you like one opportunity really to like go mano a mano where you're on even footing, and if you fuck up there, well, now they're in the advantage and you're probably toast,
Yeah,
which is a scary thing. So not only do they give you very few moments, but even in that moment they are the toughest to overcome.
yeah, absolutely.
Tough stuff, tough stuff.
It's rough, and I mean, looking at Gen G as well. Gen G has just played an extremely strong split of League of Legends to be at the top of the LCK going into playoffs and all. They just are terrifying as well, and not as much due to the same things as T1, where if you, like you say, go mano a mano and lose to T1, you just kind of incrementally lose the game. Gen G is just like, no, we're just gonna kind of win everything from the get go, and you just are going to lose. And so they've been super strong looking into the playoffs here. We have the initial quarterfinals. We have Live Sandbox versus DRX. Then we have Damwon facing off against KT Rolster. And then from there, going into the matchups versus Gen G and T1 with the buys.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough matchup for either of the opponents of both T1 and Genji. Really at the top of their game, I think they understand the meta really well. They're tough to draft against, which is tough, um, not only to play against. So yeah, a couple of really fun semifinals coming up here in the LCK, and obviously we'll keep you updated as they go. But before any of that, let's move on to the LPL. We had a pretty good series here where IG was looking to play spoiler to OMG's playoff hopes. And with a very convincing game one, yeah, they turned it into a pretty good series.
Yeah, overall, I was very impressed from IG throughout. They were willing to just take on any fight and just brawl throughout the entirety of this series, and they were able to end up winning a decent number of fights. They didn't quite get enough to be able to pull everything out, but in game one, I mean, they just went for it. They go with the Jax in the top lane, the Samira down in the bot lane. Of course, like you said, the Wukong being a super strong pick. And on the side of OMG, I just their draft was good. The Akali just seemed kind of out of place for me. I felt like that was the pick that I was like, I just don't know, because they weren't able to get anything going, and then that pick just falls off super hard when it's behind.
Yeah, and it seemed that way for the casters as well. I do believe that the Akali has fallen out of favor in the meta, especially in these melee versus ranged matchups. Like, you just don't get the same value out of the corrupting potion as you used to, where the real benefit of these champions was you get through the early game with these really solid health items in the corrupting potion, but since they've changed those, it becomes less of a strong option. So yeah, the Akali didn't really look that great here in the game with the a very, very aggressive team comp on the side of IG. And in game one, the Jax is super interesting, especially we have Shanji choosing to go the Ignite teleport variant of the Sejuani, which I just truly believe is a flat mistake right from pick and ban. I just don't think that's right against the Jax, who is going to bring Flash plus a hop that ends up being on like a 4 second cooldown. You're never going to get away from this guy.
Right.
So that's tough in that scenario. But the another blue side Samira pick backed by aggressive jungler support. I think we may see a little bit more of this, especially with the Ari pairing. Like, it seems like Samira may be the like dive comp AD carry currently, where we're seeing it a couple of times now, which is interesting.
It is, because I like the Samira in general in the dive comp, but you also are foregoing kind of a safety net of having a bot laner who's going to be able to hopefully outlast the team fights. Like, Samira can, but the possibility of her going in, getting immediately CC'd and blown up is just a big concern.
I honestly don't know what you mean. You don't need defense if they're all dead.
Well, I mean, you're right, but we also see early on in the game around the Rift Herald, we see a big fight between both teams, and they just IG barely outlasts OMG there. Everyone's just on slivers of health bars and all. And so if all it takes is one thing kind of going a little better for OMG on that side early, and all of a sudden the Samira might be kind of behind, because you have in this game such an even early game where both teams are just kind of like letting each other like farm a little bit early on. There's not too much initial skirmishing until we get to that Herald fight.
Yep.
It's all it takes is one slip up with the Samira, because I mean, if she snowballs and gets ahead, yeah, you're right. Like, they're can't die if everyone on the other team's dead. Like, I mean, you can int it to the towers, but that's about it. So,
Right.
so that's my question with the Samira pick. I'd be interested to see it between teams that have a little more at stake, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
IG's on the side of, hey, we're not making playoffs. All we can do is potentially play spoilers. Yeah,
Right.
let's throw everything in the kitchen sink at them. But and they did, and they came out strong in game one with that.
Yeah, big time. And I really like I really like their team fight creativity as we moved into the mid and the late game. They were using their vision very creatively, creating these pockets of fog of war and finding angles where it was like the Ari and the Nautilus were getting like these little flank angles, able to catch people out from like unexpected angles, and I think that really gave IG the upper hand in fights where if they were just running straight at them, I think the Sivir Yumi would have given them a lot of them being OMG would have had kiting options, but being able to be surprising, I think, was a key to the victory for IG in game one.
Yeah, I completely agree. I on my notes I had pick after pick to start fights for IG. They can't keep getting away with this. Like, it was really just like you said, great vision control to be like, oh, here, we're going to dangle this one guy out here in vision. Oh, wait, you thought he was alone. Your entire team is dead. Goodbye.
Right.
Like, it was, I mean, even at the end, OMG goes for the Fnatic brush and has everyone hiding right in that river brush by drag. They kill Jax, they take Zika out, and then just immediately get team wiped and the game ends. I'm like,
Did you hear the cast right at that moment? I lost my shit. It was the funniest thing I've ever heard. He goes, Zika's gonna full commit on the crab. Because he charged up his counter strike, leaped, and then whacked it. So he used all of his abilities. It was just so funny, the phrasing. And the fog of war, like, just changed where it showed you, like, four people in the brush.
it's like,
It turned off, and he's hopping onto this crab. That was the funniest cast moment of the whole weekend. I was like, that was pure gold. Him like making fun of Zika, like, oh, you're dead now. It's like, dude, classic. But then, yeah, they ended up winning the game anyway. Even without their big carry pants Jax, they just won the 4v5. So that was pretty impressive.
yeah, they at that point they were just too far ahead. I mean, they had an 8K gold lead at like, I think it was around like 12, 13 minutes or something like that. They had really pushed the advantage as well, with the early dragons as well and the Rift Herald that they were able to get from their early leads. But going into game two, this draft was really interesting looking at to me. You see both AD carries get pushed pretty far down on the priority list for AD carries. The Zeri and Samira being banned out, Kalista, Draven on the other side, and so we're down to the Ezreal and the Aphelios, which we really haven't seen too much. And then on the other side, Zika playing the Jax. You see OMG go ahead and kind of pivot their game plan and bring out the Rumble for Shanji as the typical Jax counter pick that you have, and
Backbreaking.
it was brutal. So I did find the drafts really interesting, but the rumble coming out to counter the Jacks after game one was just so good, and really, in my opinion, that was kind of the reason that they were able to get a good lead in game two and in game three, to be honest.
Hmm. Yeah, and in game three, it was a whole lot more of, well, it was way more decisive. But yeah, the Rumble playing spoiler to Zca's Jax was big. There was an element of, I was actually kind of focused on the Ezreal in this game. We see his rune being the first
Mm.
strike, which is a little bit bonus damage on the first time you hit an enemy champion, and you also get a gold cash in as well. So I was interested to see how the Ezreal now kind of scales up with this like little bonus gold income. I know we've seen Ezreal on the inspiration path, I believe it's
Mm.
called,
Yeah.
like for a while, but I think the first strike is an adaptation of that seemed to be a positive change for him. Because by like mid to early game, he had a lot of damage. His ultimates were doing massive in fights, just chunking out whole members of the team. So I think the Ezreal Nautilus was quite interesting. The build seemed really good. So that was an interesting point there for OMG. But yeah, man, I can't talk enough about the Rumble plus Xin Zhao coverage of that top side, and then
Mm.
not giving any ground anywhere else. And it's like, okay, that pressure point that you had, like, yeah, whatever, man.
Yeah, it really nullified the Jacks and everything having those two, and Shanji, like, he gets the solo kill on Rumble early on. He played the advantage really well, is just burning Zika down, and then Zika even commits the flash to try and get away, and is just immediately followed by Shanji to finish him off. um,
Well, and it was so clean too. You notice he holds the flame spitter in that scenario, waiting for the flash, so then it was guaranteed. It was
yeah.
like, every time that's gonna happen.
Yep, exactly. And IG did really try to fight their way back into it, and
Yeah.
like I said, they were committing to fights at every opportunity that they had it, and they just were not able to kind of climb their way back in. It was a little too much, too early from OMG. They got their advantages, and then were just able to not give them up. And IG did make some additional kind of mistakes as well. They had, after the one dragon fight, they have three guys down in the bot, like right by the bot lane in the tri brush there, while OMG is just going and taking a top turret and a mid turret, for nothing, just sending four people mid and one top, and just pushing and taking more gold. And yeah, really from that point, OMG was able to kind of control the game really good. Vision coverage and everything, especially around the Baron. And then, yeah, just kind of poking IG out, and taking the inhibitors, and pushing to end the game.
Yeah, it was pretty clinical. And then even like moving on to game three, I have one note here that just says lots of misplays from IG. OMG just runs back the same exact team comp. They say, yeah, go for it, see if you can beat us again. We see Abel getting two more kills on another deathless game. Cream on the Ari again just racks up a massive KD. It was just IG saying like, all right, we couldn't beat it with this team comp. Let's try this team comp. And it was really questionable them forcing the Jacks again. It was like, okay, you saw their answer. If you're not going to ban it out, like you likely gotta go with something different, which points to a lack of like champion pool. Obviously, there's got to be some discomfort there where he's not looking to play other things, or maybe they banned him out. They wouldn't have even banned him out. They banned Rakan, Draven, Wukong, Kalista, Nidalee. So that's like not even top lane bans.
Yep.
So just knowing that Zeke, I guess, only has this one trick Jax. So yeah, it was even better, well played by OMG the second time around.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of just mistakes from IG as well. We see around the Herald, they're going into a big 5v5 fight. The Aphelios ults just right out of the gate to try and put some damage out and just whiffs. I think that I'm pretty sure that it was either Cream or Shanji Zonya'd as soon as he shot the ult out, and it just
Yikes.
doesn't hit them, puts no splash damage then out on anyone else on OMG's side, and then Shanji puts down the equalizer. I believe it was Shanji because Zonya using the stopwatch, because then he comes out of it, puts down the equalizer, and four members of IG are just standing on top of it.
Yep.
They dodged out initially, but then start fighting again and all walk back onto it. And you're like, I was sitting there, I'm like, they all just sat there and took a strong Rumbles ult for no reason. And so, yeah, I think at that point it was kind of starting to slip away from IG. They try to, again, they try to fight their way back, so I give them props for that. They try and get the Rumble in the top lane, but OMG reacted so quickly with the TPs from Ari and from Ezreal to the top lane to just win that fight and counter that advantage that IG had. They were just able to really snowball, and of course one of the greatest potential caster calls of all time with the QuadraCreme around Dragon that ends up giving OMG a free Baron. That was when I heard is it Atlas or who? I'm trying to think who the casters are for the LCK, but whoever it was is just like getting super like excited and amped up. And he's like, the QuadraCreme. I'm like, oh my god.
That is just the milkiest call ever.
Like, I hope that is in every Worlds like hype video where they're talking about any teams that are going. If OMG makes it, that has to be in their like hype video.
Oh, I hope it is the QuadraCreme. It is every man's dream. Just four right in a row. QuadraCreaming, Pentacreaming.
It was close, not quite.
Not quite.
But yeah,
with that QuadraCreme, OMG is able to clinch their playoff slot, just ease in there right up next to FPX. So yeah, I think that was a really exciting match. IG had some chances. Obviously, their game one was pretty good, but yeah, it all kind of fell apart against that Ezreal Ari Nautilus combo.
Yeah, it's tough once you get behind in that matchup, and OMG played it out well. But of course, for the LCK or for the LPL playoffs, we have a very large bracket comparatively to the other regions, so you have RNG and V5 getting a 2-round bye. You have Top Esports and JDG getting a 3-round bye. So FPX and OMG in round 1, and LNG Billy Gaming in the other side of the bracket for round 1. It is a best, they do have a losers bracket as well. So we've got a ton of LCK matchups
LPL
before
matchups.
I keep doing that. Sorry. LPL matchups before we'll see who all will be coming out on top going to Worlds. Anything else from the LPL?
I don't think so. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how V5 does. And interestingly, if V5 is able to come out on top of, let's say they beat their opponent from WB and LNG, let's say they beat their opponent there and move on against JDG, if it ends up being top esports and V5 in the semifinals, I think that would be a very exciting matchup. We would see a repeat of a series that we saw last split in the LPL, which was a banger. I think both of those teams are really solid and produce just a great match against one another. So that's a possible storyline that we have. Just a lot of like really exciting matches coming up here at the top of the LPL in playoffs. So yeah, obviously it's playoff season coming into next week. Looking ahead, we're gonna have a bunch of matches. We may just like sprinkle highlights. We may not even like focus on anything specific. We may just try and get an overall flavor, an overall sense, and then going into like the final rounds, like the semis and the finals, then maybe we can kind of zoom in our microscope a little bit more because we're gonna have like literally thousands of games to go over just in these just couple of days. So maybe just a more general sprinkling look here until we get into the final stages as we look ahead to Worlds. But overall, a lot of really exciting stuff coming up. Truly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to touch briefly on the LEC as well.
Yeah, who do we got?
We have G2 and Mad Lions that finished 12-6. So G2 to the top seed, then Rogue, then Misfits Gaming, Fnatic, and Excel, who all made it into the playoffs. Fnatic and Excel we have playing in a best of 5 in the losers bracket. Then we have Rogue and Mad Lions, and then G2 and Misfits in the top side. G2 made a really, really solid run here. For the second half of the split, they started out pretty low down, I think in 7th or 8th, and were able to make a run to all the way to the top of the table for the LEC. So really solid second half for them and kind of coming into their form. So I think that will be a good matchup versus Misfits, where G2 has been looking strong. The Rogue Mad Lions matchup, I think, is going to be another good one. Mad Lions bouncing back after having kind of a rough spring split. If I'm remembering correctly, they didn't. I don't even think they made playoffs. I'll have to double check, but yeah, in spring split they missed out on playoffs after having a decent Worlds right before that.
Yep.
So a nice bounce back from them to be up there at the top of the LEC, or towards the top of the LEC in second position there.
Yeah, so we'll see who comes out on top there and see who will be the European representatives for Worlds this year.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know we have a little bit of Magic the Gathering to sprinkle in this evening, so if we want to move right along, I'll let you get into it.
Cool. I think it's less about gushing about like cards and specific things and more like from I want to say like a mental health note where I'm grateful for it as a hobby, where previously my baseline would have been some form of self-loathing or anxiety or worry or whatever. Now my baseline is a low grade, constant like trickle of ideas
Hmm.
and like tinkering. So during the quiet moments, if I'm just hanging out, sitting with Sasha, having some coffee, nothing on a screen, I'm not doing anything. My baseline is thinking about cards in my collection and is there a better home for it than where it is right now?
Hmm.
So, what I've been doing this weekend, I have just a little small collection of bulk that I've pulled out of binders. I was like, these are not commander cards, in my opinion. I'm not like itching to build with them. They're not like worth anything in the sense of like wanting to keep for, sell them later because I know they're going to go up. It's all chaff. They're all worth a dime, so it's nothing super exciting. But because my mind is continually tinkering, every time I've gone through that box, there's like little like pins that get left and it's like, "Oh, you have 4 of these. You have 4 of these. What could you do with them?" So it'll just be like a random Thursday I'm walking down the street and I'm like, "All right, what do I do with that play set?" And then it's all the what can go and what's got to move and blah blah blah. But I say all of this to say it's enjoyable to have a hobby that I can tinker with that I don't necessarily have to be next to be engaged with it
Hmm.
because it's given me a break from my own sometimes insanity that I think used to be there.
I think that's one thing that is really nice, and it's something that I've thought about a number of times with just life in general, like hobbies. I feel
I'm a
like
hobby
I
advocate.
feel like a lot of people, like, if they think about it, they may have some difficulty coming up with a hobby of theirs. Like, I don't. I mean, yeah, it. I guess it also depends what you consider, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, I work and then I go and find random fun things to do with my friends, and then I like watch Netflix
Right.
and
Like I
or
go home, I
like
watch my show, I go to bed.
yeah, and so like with that, you are still like living a like hopefully enjoyable life. Like you're spending time with friends, family, like doing things and all. But there's not something that you like really are enjoying on a consistent basis, like again and again, as something that you're like, I can this thing, I can put my mind and my soul into this and really just enjoy it for like what it is, as opposed to like, hey, going out with friends, doing stuff with family, that's awesome, it's fun, you can find good things to do, and enjoy, but it's not something that like you said, in those quiet moments that you are necessarily like sitting there and going, oh man, I'm thinking about this hobby, this passion of mine, something that I'm really interested in, and like nothing else has to be going on, but you're thinking about that thing and how you can improve on it, or how you can like better yourself in it, become more well-rounded at your hobby. I think that's a very cool thing. Like there are lots of neat interests that people have, and being able to turn that into something that you enjoy on a consistent basis is really awesome. Um, so that's a pretty cool thing, and I agree on the mental health aspect. I think it's a really nice break almost to just be able to like escape into something that you really like to do.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of elements to it where I really enjoy like the framing of the cards where there are certain cards that I have that I keep that I love the way the border sits next to the color of like the next section of it and it's all very like organized and neat, So there's the visual element, there's the tactile element. I love how smooth they are. I love the size. It feels not too big, but not too small.
That's what
There's
she
an
said.
element. Ah, there's an
Sorry.
element where it's the perfect fit for me. So I love that element of it.
Yeah.
There's interesting things there to be had. So this weekend in the tinkering, I do you remember I sold some PlayStation
Hmm.
gadgets and turned them into Magic cards.
Yep.
One of the cards that I pulled out of those packs was the showcase version of Rafine Scheming Seer from the new set Streets of New Capenna. And it's one of those cards I was super happy to pull the showcase version so my commander would be all, different and pretty. So I was happy about that. And it was a commander that I was like not originally excited to build. Like, when you see it spoiled in posts about commander decks, you always see people say, like, man, right when this card was spoiled, I just had to start brewing a deck. Like, you have no idea how many times you see that at the start of like deck posts. It's hilarious. Anyway,
I
so not
believe it. That's like the preamble to any cooking recipe that you see online. Oh, well,
the
I
story. The
I
story.
saw I saw this at a restaurant, and when I had it, it just wasn't it. So I had to go home and make it on my own. Like,
Yes, me and Sarah make fun of those all the
dude,
time.
it
She
kills me.
fucking hates them.
It's
Oh,
miserable. You have to like scroll through so much of
yes,
nonsense just to get to the
yes.
recipe. And
It
so
was
same
my
thing. It's like,
grandmom's from the low country, dude.
yeah,
Yes, you nailed it. You nailed it. It is that exact same vibe on a Magic post. Yeah. So
yeah,
Rafine, not the case for me, but in having this box and seeing what was in there, because I'm just flipping through it constantly. Like if I'm
yeah.
listening to a podcast, I'm like focused on what they're doing, but I'm just looking. I'm just seeing what's there. And in seeing what's there, I've seen a bunch of flyers and I've seen a bunch of all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, man, with a different perspective, if you look at these cards just a little differently, they all start to work together. And then my mind starts going through my commander decks. And I'm like, okay, I have this there. I have that there. I can pull that, sub that, grab this, put that there. I'm like a witch working on my brew, and all of a sudden I've got like 70 cards, 70 like non land cards in a stack that all work together for this commander. I'm like, damn, dude. Where previously I was like, oh, this is garbage. This is nothing. I want to get rid of this. I'll give it away. I'm going to use this as toilet paper. Now they're all in a stack, and I'm like, well, I need sleeves for these things because this is a commander deck now, baby.
Are you
So it's
hurting any of your other decks by pulling stuff to
no.
craft? No, not at all.
If anything, I'm able to like just make a different choice. If anything, they're just like lateral movements or like
Gotcha. Okay.
even slight upgrades in some cases.
Yeah, that maybe you didn't think of before. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So like it's even a way to like freshen up a little bit some old lists
Yeah.
and give it a different home where maybe it like didn't really fit. It was just kind of a slot.
Mm.
So that's like always really fun. So just trying to look at my collection continually in different ways and say like, oh man, even though this isn't, high power and gonna win a tournament or whatever, like it is a budget, flavorful, it will work kind of deck, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, that's its own kind of fun.
That's very cool. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I was so I imagine like a example for the non-magic people, like you maybe have land in one deck that's an island, but then you have this other one, you're like, well, I can swap that out because it doesn't matter in the deck for a like this other deck that I'm trying to build, that like islands do something
Right.
special with a or have an interaction. So Very cool. I'm glad you're enjoying that. And like, I feel like with Magic, there's endless tinkering, so that's a cool thing that you kind of just unendingly have the ability to do.
Yeah, until that box runs out anyway.
Well, I mean, by then there's probably going to be another box that came out, and then maybe just even if you pick up just like one like booster pack of something for like $5 or whatever it is, like you end up with the potential for, oh well, this fits there better than this. Well, now that can go to there, and you just
Right.
like for
And that
five.
feeling is constant.
Well, and for $5 or whatever for a booster pack, you could have like just hours and hours of enjoyment, like figuring those things out. So there's uh, it's in that sense like a worthwhile investment into it's like an entertainment. It's like someone going to watch a baseball game or something like that. You're
Sure.
like, oh, I'm paying a little bit of money and I get to enjoy hours of this thing that I enjoy. Dope. Totally
Oh
worth
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. And then it all factors in like to the social element. We talk about the Commander 9 group all the time, having a place to go then to enjoy it with friends and people that you enjoy spending time with. It all factors in. I think it's all good stuff. So yeah, that's just kind of where my head has been with Magic. So I just need a box of sleeves, and I may have a new little budget Commander deck. So that was pretty cool. But let us not keep these people any longer. Thank you for hearing about that. Let's get this flavor of the week on the roll here, Aaron. What do you got for me?
So for this week for my music, it's just been I call it like heavy stuff. So like for working out and whatnot, and also in some of my drives lately, I've just been listening to like heavier music, some like of the like experimental rap, dark trap like genre that I've kind of enjoyed for primarily workouts because it's just very like kind of get you amped up music and aggressive, and I feel like it just helps me like get a pump going.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then some like for my drives a little more like punk rock, metalcore, that kind of stuff. I feel like now I'm past the my poppy summer type mood. So
Of
I'm
course.
shifting as the weather's cooled down, like you were talking about
Yes.
earlier. Windows
Yes.
down, I can listen to my music genres that I'm listening to has shifted a little bit. So I've been moving over to a little bit more of that, yeah, like punk rock, metalcore as well.
Very cool.
For my food, it has to be the hors d'oeuvres at the wedding.
Ooh.
They had
Finger foods.
the finger foods during the
Oh yeah.
cocktail hour, man.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, I'm grabbing a couple of drinks. I had done my part and was like, I can just relax now. I have
No more jobs.
no more jobs. I like did my thing. I just get to go and enjoy and chat with people and grab drinks and eat food. And they had my favorite hors d'oeuvre of any wedding, whether it's one that I've catered or ones that I've been to. Bacon wrapped scallops are the shit. I love those things. They're so good. They also had some stuffed mushrooms that were solid, and
Okay.
a little setup of just like California roll sushi with like wasabi and ginger and everything. Like
Ooh.
really like
Eclectic.
yeah, eclectic. I was gonna say varied, but eclectic's a better word. Eclectic assortment of hors d'oeuvres, all phenomenal. So had to shout that out. And then for my visual medium this week, Colleen and I have been doing some binging, which I really don't do too frequently, but we're watching Last Man on Earth, which is an old, I believe, FX show. Um, it took me a few episodes to get into it in the first season. The main character is difficult for me to enjoy because like you know how you were talking at the beginning of the episode with Cheezel?
Yeah, Mr. Cheezel from
Mr.
Grandma's Boy.
Cheezel? Yes. How you're like, oh, he like drags out the thing a little longer than like you're expecting, and it's funny. Well, the main character in Last Man on Earth drags out everything to a painful extent where I'm just like, please stop talking. Like, I can't hear you, like, beat this point into the ground, beat the dead horse any longer. The concept of the show is that this was made, I think, back in like 2014, 2015, but there's a pandemic that wipes out almost everyone on planet Earth. This guy spends his time just kind of dicking off and like driving around the country collecting and stealing every potential like valuable thing, like famous paintings, the Declaration of Independence, because everyone's dead. He's like, I'm just taking all of these things for myself and leaving like signs saying that he is alive in Tucson, Arizona, because that's where he's from. And he just goes back there with like King Tut's sarcophagus and like the Declaration of Independence. And so in the concept of things, the social skills that you lose in a long time of not being around people, I can understand why his character plays so well into just like dragging out every joke and like beating everything like to a pulp as a point, because you just lose the social skills from not talking to people until all of a sudden you end up finding people.
Gotcha. Okay, so he finds people. I
Yeah,
thought you
sorry,
were just
no.
having like monologues. And I
No,
was like, dude, that's brutal.
he ends up there ends up being a few other people that somehow
Okay.
have lasted through
So
this
not
pandemic.
the last man.
He thinks he is for like 2 years and then
Right.
finds out that
That's
is not the
spooky.
case. So a very long time of not having social interaction. They do a great job of making him a character that you like. You're like, you really just want him to like get it together, and you're rooting for him in a sense, but it's so difficult to like him at a lot of points. Very well written show. Like I said, it took me a few episodes to get into it, but like now we've just been cruising through episodes. I'm like, I need to see what happens next, and has been a lot of fun.
Nice. That's
So,
exciting.
Yeah, so that's my flavor of the week. What have you got for us for all the ladies and gentlemen?
I'll start with my visual medium. We finally finished the Infinity Saga. I believe on Saturday we started, nice and early. It's a 3-hour film. We sat down, watched Endgame, finished the series, and had a nice, what did we think overall, blah blah blah, our tears, our joys, our this was that, and blah blah blah. So yeah, a lot of fun. We came out immediately saying like a roller coaster, we were like, let's do it again. So that was really fun to see it like all again very quickly, like knowing all of the details, all of the little connections and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of fun doing that. My food here for the weekend, Sarah cooked up a nice old chuck roast, low and slow in the in the cooker there. Starts it early in the afternoon. We get to eat it, late at night. Spends all day cooking. So that is always a great meal. She knocks it out of the park. And then my music here for the week. Me and Sarah were doing some organizing in the office. We are constantly downsizing, constantly like trying to say, hey, do we need this? What can we get rid of? Is this better here? Blah, blah, blah. And so we were doing some organizing in the office, and I took it upon myself to play some music. I just grabbed the first record that was on the pile, put on Good Kid, Mad City, got through sides A and B, before we took a little break for lunch. And it's just it's just phenomenal every time. I wish we could have finished it, but some other things came up. But yeah, the first two sides are really great. And the more I listen, here's the little detail, the more I enjoy the Drake feature. I've come to understand there was a point in his career where Drake actually like did some like pretty quality writing.
Mm.
Um, and I think that verse on Poetic Justice, there's just the right amount of comedy in it where it's like that's a quality little verse right there. So Good Kid, Mad City on the turntables while we were organizing was super fun. But yeah, that's my flavor of the week here, Aaron.
Love it. Love to hear listening to Kendrick. Good Kid, Mad City is a fun, awesome
It's good
album.
for the
Just
soul.
oh, absolutely. But that does bring us to the conclusion of this week's episode. Everyone, thank you, of course, for listening week after week. We really appreciate it. Just as a reminder, you can find us on Google Podcasts, find us on Spotify, check us out on YouTube. We are also on Twitter if you want to join in the conversation at Tall and Short of One. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episodes, what your flavor of the week are, your rose, thorn, and seed. Let us know. But thank you for listening.
Thank you for tuning in. Just like Aaron said, new episodes every Thursday. They drop the audio version, the video version on YouTube. So thank you everybody so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. Other than that, it's been a joy. That's the end of the Tall and Short of It podcast here for the week. Peace out, everybody.
Later.